Hey everybody, it's Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and we are here for my Lifebook main lesson. When I mentioned earlier, I hope you watched the intro because it kind of goes over this. Originally, I'd planned to do a whole lesson on using Midjourney and turning that into art because when this technology came out, it really required a lot of creative interaction just to get something out of anything that it imagined. But literally week by week, the evolution of that stuff changed so much that it became very evident to me that anything I even said now could be completely irrelevant in that amount of time. And so I had this really neat idea about like looking at the old images of Wonderland ideas that I had collaborated with the AI into like what it looks like now. So what it looks like then and how it's like photographic now. And then also what my personal take is just a human being is on the subject, which is so different than what the technology would do. And so that was sort of an interesting process just creatively to share with you, like showing both of those things and, and then showing, well, this is my take on that subject. And so we, of course, decided to stay in that Wonderland space, that sort of upside down, topsy turvy world where everything you do and see is not as it seems, and you have to say what you mean and mean what you say, and um, you know, villains are not clear and friends are not clear. And it's sort of a crazy world right now. And I think that's how we all feel. I think, like, existentially, I know I've been going through a lot as the polarity of everyone around me gets turned up and the technology gets turned up. And it just feels like the speed of my world is like going through a wormhole sometimes. So it's nice to sit in the art space that I have and step by step create something like this and share it with you. So I'm going to break this down step by step. I'm going to tell you the materials I'm using. I'm going to explain to you the techniques. You're going to have your PDF written instructions. You'll have your traceable. You don't have to draw her, or you could just draw your own version of her. It's all fine. And we're going to create this together. We'll talk a little bit about different things and process and just kind of our space and our creative self. I can't wait to see yours. There's really nothing for you to do but get your paint, get your brushes, and come back and join me at my tilted easel. This is actually, it looks like a table, but it's actually tilted easel. And we will paint this together. So our surface today is a 9 by 12 stretched canvas. This is from the Classic Cotton in Art Alternatives. I do highly recommend them. You could use paper or canvas paper or your art journal. For the techniques here, because paper is so absorbent, I would suggest like painting or sealing the paper with like a coat of white paint first, just to let that take care of the absorbency so that you can get the other blending and everything that happens. I think that's the number one thing that throws everybody off when they're doing paper with acrylic is paper's like a sponge and you need to seal it with acrylic, even more than gesso with the acrylic paint to get it to stop pulling all the moisture out. Now I have yellow ochre, cad yellow medium, you could use hue, cad red medium, you could also use hue, dioxazine purple, quinacridone magenta, phthalo blue, phthalo green, Mars black, burnt sienna, and titanium white. Now on any of these, when I say you can use hue, that's just a cost saving thing, and you can have close, especially for this painting, close approximations of colors. All right, let's throw up step one and we will begin with the roughing in stage. Now you can use the traceable here in step one if you don't want to do the freehanding process, but I'm going to show you how I would do my freehanding process just in case you want to go along with me. I'm going to take this small round. This is a number 6 Raphael, and I'm going to go ahead and put on my vision enhancer so I can see what I'm doing. I think that always helps. And I'm going to begin to sketch in just the general shape and placement of my figure here. So we're doing the Queen of Hearts. That is our kind of Wonderland themed idea that we're doing. And I feel like, given that, my topic initially was about AI and artificial art, artificially intelligent created art, and how that's changing things for artists and how that's even changed things for me, Wonderland is a good sort of place to start. So, but again, for me, this is a little different because you can see me create this live. You see the process, and that sort of helps you. I am coming here. I'm trying to take up a good mid-range of the top and bottom, leaving myself a space for hair on the face. And I'm going to be doing a 3/4 face. So it's generally trying to capture the sense of the brow coming down into where the eye space will be and a little bit bumping the cheek out. I like the yellow ochre because I can paint over it easily. I'm going to make sure that I bring a long neck out, come down into the chin a little bit, and I'm going to exaggerate some things as you do. And because we're going to have so much hair and stuff coming through, I'm not going to worry about what's happening down here so much. Now, my chin's here, and that kind of is going to put my center line here, and I may move my chin a little bit to place my center line there because I do want to have enough room to be able to drop my eyes. Now, I'm not putting the face facing me, so my center line just isn't going to be in the center of this space. If I want to change even some sketches, if I add a little black into my yellow ochre, that can help me think about my lines a bit and how I am forming and shaping them. Now my eyes will generally come across this space here on the face. So I have my center line and that coming through. I will kind of rinse this out. I like to be a little sketchy at first because sometimes I will change things, I'll raise things up, I'll move things down, I will alter my mind. I'm going to get a little of my burnt sienna into the yellow ochre black mix, and I want to do a couple of things. I want to set an eyebrow here, up high and up over the lid area. And this is also going to help me set my nose. I'm going to curl this out a little bit. Noses will stop in the midway space between the eyes and the chin generally. We're human beings. Biology has variance, so much variance. So this is just a general placement. When you're doing portraiture of a person that you know, for somebody, you've got to be much more specific about that. But for this, we are creating a fantasy character, and therefore we're only beholden to what we visualize. You can see that I'm already starting to sort of pull my chin down a little bit, making space for putting a mouth in here. Going to exaggerate the upturn of my nose, I think. Here we go. And I'll be putting a shadow under there, so as I move these sort of objects here, I can kind of go, okay, now I'm going to have that little shadow there. Now, much like this side of the lip is going to be shortened. So we'll curl a little bit of the lip button up and bring that down, bringing the other eyes over further out and to the left. Again, if you're using the traceable, if you're like, I really don't like drawing or any of this, that's okay to do. If you're doing Lifebook, there's so much good figurative and face work to take part of. I would highly suggest it, but you know, it's never something that you have to do. And again, we're sketching in paint, so a lot of these lines can be changed at a later date if you feel like you would want to. The pillow there, and I'm going to just talk about an eye here. We're going to do the eyes closed. I want to make sure that I imply the distance of an eye between the eyes. Again, that's a general thing that we get, is a distance of an eye between the eyes. I'm going to kind of erase that. Again, just generally doing a brow. Sometimes I'll get into it and be like, no, and then yes, no, yes, no. And that's okay. that is okay for us to do, is sort of like play with where we want objects to be. But I do want between these two there to be about an eye's width in this. Sketching this down here, just making sure I'm fairly happy with most placement. I know I'm going to be bringing a lot of wonderful curled hair through here, red hair, and through here as well, coming down. And the different things that we're going to do to kind of delineate that she is the Queen of Hearts and Queen of Roses. Okay, so I think you can do the full traceable at this stage and get all the details in, or you can just loosely get this in and save the details for later. But this is sort of what you want here. When we come back, I am going to show you how to get the background in. In step 2, I'm going to be taking this 3/4 inch Catalyst angle brush. It could be a bright, it could be really any brush that you're comfortable painting backgrounds in. Why I'm choosing this though is for the stiff bristles. I'm going to get it lightly damp. I'm going to pull out a little bit of my phthalo blue, and I'm going to add some burnt sienna to it, and that's going to kind of green and darken it. And I'm going to begin to paint this background. Now, because the face is going to be so light and the hair is going to be so red, we're going to be using both contrast and hue to create a lot of drama in this space. I don't have to paint neatly or preciously through here because one, there's going to be a lot of layers, and two, there's going to be a lot of hair, and the background is very kind of rough and rustic, which really allows you guys to play, where you don't have to be worried about, you know, your blending and every little, you know, detail, you know. Think a lot about how technology changes process for artists like myself, because you know I couldn't be doing a more traditional thing here. It's painting on canvas. It's a pretty like not pushing the avant-garde edge of things kind of art form, and yet you know I've never really felt like I was missing out from that. Like, it's not that I don't appreciate that type of art when it comes up. I'm going to extend the blue a little bit into the neck as I go. And the reason being is that I just get a lot of joy from what I do. And I think as technology advances and we go through these big significant changes, and I do highly recommend, if you feel up to just learning a little bit more about it, to go online and, you know, look up some mid-journey tutorials and maybe go in and check out that community yourself and make up your own mind sort of based on that. Whenever there's anything new, people just tend to really jump to conclusions one way or the other, and instead of just being patient and taking a wait and see kind of attitude, like be open but also not rushing in so head first that, you know, you trip over your own feet. I'm just adding burnt sienna to the phthalo blue, and I'm just going to paint everything around here, even going behind. Yes, there's going to be masses and masses of hair, but having this layer here is going to, you know, really, really give us a good anchor for the beginning. Easy to build up and layer over if we want. Now, in acrylic, you've got to allow the layers to dry. This is where I kind of sometimes like digital painting over, you know, necessarily acrylic painting, is that it's sort of instantaneously dry in its little virtual space, but here we have to either dry it with a hairdryer or allow it to dry completely to get a kind of dry brushing or layering up. So rinse your brush out well and put it to the side. I'm going to use a hairdryer, and when we come back, we're going to do the next layer with it completely dry. So I'm back to my 3/4 inch angle Princeton Catalyst brush, and I'm going to do another layer. This is completely dry. I'm into kind of similar colors. I'm going to grab my phthalo blue and maybe a little of my phthalo green this time, and some white. And I'm going to begin to make short downward strokes These are sort of vertical and they're creating a kind of rough pattern. It's going to feel a little rustic and remind us a little bit of maybe some wood, even though it is definitely not wood. There's a bit of a dry brush to it, and you can see it's just creating a little bit of movement and texture to the background. This is a nice background to do if one is looking for a nice background. Just little short strokes, and I'm just allowing it to be streaky and very, very imperfect. Come up here, and again, it's just a little phthalo blue, phthalo green, and titanium white work together. See, here we go. Sometimes more green, sometimes more blue, sometimes more white, and a little bit streaky, and it creates this motion in a fairly static background, which I do like. Now, coming down, I'm going to sort of rinse my brush out. And down low, I do want things to be darker, so I'm going to take my phthalo blue and Doc's purple together. Kind of weave this up in. And so you can see when I'm coming up through here, I open it up so it kind of pulls in. And then it's definitely darker down here. And it's because I want that deep value at the base. So I get a very nice indigo when I use dioxazine purple and phthalo blue. You could just use the darkest blue that you have in your brush paint bucket. That's okay. If you're using craft paints, some of the dry brushing techniques are more challenging. And what you can do is to make sure that your brush is drier and the load of it, that's how much paint's on it, is a little bit lighter, and that your pressure is a little bit lighter to compensate for the fluidity of the paint. And go ahead and get a little brown on here and kind of weave that in. If you can see down here, just weaving in a little brown, burnt sienna. It's very layered. Just slightly coming over. And again, this is an open patterning. I'm trying to leave spaces between the paint marks so we can really see all the color. That's going to give us some of that really wonderful, lush yumminess to the whole thing. I'm going to get a little bit of my yellow ochre and perhaps a bit of my titanium white, and I'm going to come up here and on these edges sort of pull out a little bit of this. You can come into the center a little, but it's going to be heaviest on that outer edge and corner. And again, you know, going to just make sure that I'm good. Kind of loosely weaving that through, and that should just give you a very soft, kind of emotional, abstracted background, right? It's not specifically anything. It's just kind of nice in color. It will play against our figure quite well. And again, because we're going to paint her in such a pale way, that there's going to be this great kind of contrast as well. So we're playing with color and we're playing with contrast. Dry this thoroughly. We'll come back. I'll show you what you do next. So I've got my vision enhancers on again so I can see details. I'm going to start painting in the face. And the reason I'm going to paint this in now is because the way this objects layer into this painting, you need to have the skin painted on and the background painted on before you can put the hair and the way it layers over both those objects. So I'm going to start with my D brush. This is a number 0 texture D brush. And basically what it is it looks like the letter D. It's a filbert that's a little bit fatted out on one side. You could just use a filbert or a braid. This is just a brush that I like. You could use a different brush. I would not be offended. I'm going to take a little bit of my blue, and I'm going to come here to the inner corner of this eye and begin the process of sort of shaping this side of things. Adding a little white. Come back here and get a little blue. Hopefully grab a little white. I may, you know, make one bigger or smaller as I paint in the lids. I'm just making sure that I've got kind of that basic element of everything here. Grab a little purple. Kind of adding to that little divot. The inner fold of that lip. It's just really nice to kind of think about those things. And take a little bit of my blue and burnt sienna together. And I'm going to kind of make a gray color. Adding more brown till I get there. And I'm going to shade the shadow under the nose. It can really, you know, help us get a nice upturned nose to get that shadow in early. Come in and put lots of little details in later. I am going to switch out from this brush to a larger brush so that I can work the face a little easier. This is just a slightly larger filbert, and I may even go up into like a bright. So this is a number 8 Simply Simmons Bright, and this is a number 4 Issa Bay Acrylic filbert. And you can see what I mean about a filbert and a D brush are very similar. And what I'm going to want to do is paint large areas in my basic skin color, and then come in and detail with my D brush and my filbert. I'm going to get my big bright a little bit wet, and I'm going to kind of load in some yellow ochre, smidge of cad red, and then just a ton of white. This is just going to be very, very light. I may even kind of let my eyebrows diminish a little bit there, a little bit there. I'm going to pull my skin further back into the hairline. That way I can do lots of little tendrils. And this is that first layer to sort of get everything started. White is a color that does a lot of coverage, so it's kind of easy to work with. I'll have to kind of put that lid back. You can see me. That's an example of an area where I'm going to come back and work things in the filberts more, in the D brush more, so that I have a little more control. You don't have to be perfect. We're just getting that first layer in. You'll notice that I am being careful to stay out of the blue at this stage with my white. Sometimes you've just got to get some work on there, and then you can get more playful, you know, as you see fit. Again, and we're pulling the face a little further back because we know we want to go over that with hair. And you can't do that until that's pushed back. I'm going to take this filbert and kind of work a couple areas in a little bit. You can always come back with a little bit of blue and fix any little shading that I've got to worry about at this stage. Adding a little bit of white on that inside. It's okay that it's picking up blue because we will eventually have some blue kind of worked in the skin tone. I just want to get the values and basic planes sort of worked out. And then I can always come back in and make adjustments. Okay, that's far enough painted in. We're going to dry everything and we're going to come back and continue defining details and features. So I have a number for Raphael texture around. It's just because I want a little more detail to be able to go. And I'm going to grab, interestingly enough, a little of my black. And I'm going to kind of work in and define some of the more key shapes and elements of what I have going on. And because the type of painting that we're doing here, I can really, really do that. And come along this little nose and really curve that up. Going to add a shadow for what is a nostril. You know, and then through shading and everything, I can define stuff a little more delicately. The only thing when I'm using a round brush, I really, really want to make sure that I do is that I don't let too much water get up on the shaft of the brush because it will come down and kind of mess with me. And that can be a little bit frustrating. I'm going to come in and sort of shade there a bit, a little bit of a highlight. I like to really play and come in and back off and then come in and back off. Now I do think I'm going to want to highlight this part of the nose a bit. Just taking some white. Just making sure that that highlight is clear. And a little bit at the top of that nostril. And a little bit underneath there too. Isn't that wild? Fun stuff. I'm going to get a little of my blue and maybe my purple, and interestingly enough, a little brown even in there. Creates an interesting sort of gray mixture as well. And I'm going to make sure that I've got a dark kind of shadow coming down here. I don't mind if I kind of dry brush and I'm rough with it. That's okay. Come back with a slightly damp brush and move it around. It's all right for her to be a little bit roughly treated. I'm going to smooth in with my finger. See, that sort of blends out. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of my quinacridone magenta and cad red and a smidge of Doc's purple. Kind of create a deep burgundy. Make sure that I've got the start of my lips. Now this will take some shading to really pull these into existence, but it's nice to get the color on there early so you can keep deepening it as you need to. I'm going to go ahead and get a little of my white and gray color, which was my phthalo blue, and my burnt sienna. Blend that up at the top of that lip. Gonna just make sure that that's a little defined there. I'm going to grab some of my yellow ochre. Come up over the eye. And a bit to this outside edge. I'll get into my blue even over here, which will sort of green it. I like my phthalo blue and burnt sienna quite a lot, and I will go ahead and take a dark version and kind of blend these two together. So I'm working wet into wet here to get that gradation. A little bit wet, maybe even a little bit wetter. I just want to stain everything. See, it's just like staining it down, and that's really where it's very watery and it's getting into elements of the canvas. It's kind of a fun thing to do. I'm going to get a little of my yellow here and kind of think about being right here at the lid. Definitely up over into that brow area. And blending back and forth. And maybe a little bit under the eye here. It's a wiggling motion of the brush. It doesn't have a lot of pigment in it. Pretty easy to work out. I get my brush into a little bit of white and yellow ochre. Back into the phthalo blue and burnt sienna. Just blending this in. It's kind of like doing makeup. We're just getting those first moments in. Okay, this is another one of those spaces where I want everything to be dry so I can build the next parts up. So in this step, I'm going to be using a D brush again. This is a number 8 Raphael Artany brush, but it's the hog bristlets because I want to do some very scratchy work. You know, just use your roughest brush. We're going to get into some real fantasy color here, you know, that maybe are not colors that you would expect to see on her skin. I'm going to take a little bit of that mix of my white, blue, and yellow ochre, and I'm going to come over here and begin to scumble or scruffily kind of blend in this little fantasy over here. You know, it does speak a little bit about shadow and all of that. It does talk to lighting, but it's also not really based in, you know, reality on skin tones or anything like that. And that's okay. I'm just adding a little kind of yellow ochre in here. Come in. As I come around, you know, the rest of the face, I can lighten everything up. It's good sometimes to wash the brush out and get fresh paint. One of the things that might be happening to you in acrylic is that you will find that it's maybe drying too quickly on you, and that's really just region by region and, gosh, paint by paint and setup by setup and house by house. It's just amazing how completely specific it is. But what you can do is you can use a wet palette like what I have here, or you can use a mister bottle to keep the paint wet, or you can have a humidifier in the room or a medium that slows down the drying time of the paint. So don't let the quick drying like put you off painting with it, because actually it's super lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and get my brush into that little kind of black and brown there, and it's kind of a gray. And I'll go ahead and maybe shade this part of the nose a little bit. See just a bit of a shadow. Come down here and shade the neck a little bit. Take my blue and brown and again scumbling down here. Come back into my pinker kind of yellow ochre cad red and white. It's like fun to play up these different things. Maybe even come back up here with a little of that and around the hairline. Again, we're just playing. Back with light color. Get a little more white on there. Kind of puts everything in shadow. Kind of on that side. And that's okay. Maybe a little under these lips here. I'm going to go ahead and sort of blend that back a bit. So it's there, but it's not so intense. A little more yellow ochre there. Then I'm going to come back into the neck. And we're again just creating a light value. Now I can always get into my dark purple and blue here and make sure that I've got a nice clean line. I've got a lot of hair coming, but you know, the clean line won't hurt me. I just have to be sure that I rinse that out. Put some of these brushes over to this side here so I have a little bit of control over it. And I think I'm going to take my round, right? And I'm going to come in again and do a little bit of my quinacridone, Docs purple, and Cad red together and get this very deep burgundy. Just tip that up. Now, if I add white to this and a little more quinacridone, get kind of a lighter lip color that I can add to that lower lip and right here, just capturing a little bit of the light. So we're just adding those little highlights to that outer little edge there. And to this little center here, and I might even get a little lighter. Just really pulling it up. And that looks quite nice. We don't have to get too deep about it. We don't have to be too robust about it. That's not required of us. My dark purple. Just blend that in and give that a little bit of, just a little shape, little contouring. While I'm here, I definitely want to take my Docs purple, my quinacridone, and my Cad red. Right here, coming up what would be the center line, make a little line. And add a little heart. To the queen, so that's going right there. I'm going to again take a little of this and initially draw a fairly thin line just to see if I like where it's going, and then I can always change it if I don't. All right, where we start putting in that brow line, I'm going to just flick up a little bit. It's fun for me. I sort of let the little brush hairs flail out. It's looking fairly good. Come into my yellow here. Again, really playing with that color and placement. Let's take a little bit of our phthalo blue and our burnt sienna together. It's such a fun, nice color. And we'll just blend in. And come to the other side as well. Sometimes I add a little white and then a little color back, just so again I can get that nice blending. Again, we're not trying to make a human face, we're making a Wonderland face. Take a little bit of white and yellow ochre, still on my round brush. Just adding little highlights where I think it would be important to do so. I get a little bit of my Cad Red, Quinacridone Magenta, and purple color, and I'm going to come underneath my eyes. And the brush is a little bit watery. And kind of dust down a little bit of this color. If you have pure Cad pigment, you may want to glove for this. Some people have allergies or concerns. If you have hue, you don't really have to worry about it at all. If I need to put my white back, then I'll just come back and put my little white line back there. Take a little Cad Red. Add it to the heart, which is dry now up top. Looking quite good. And I will switch for the lashes, and the reason is that I want something that gives me a lot of control over my line. So I'm going to use a Princeton #1 Select Liner. I'm going to get a little bit wet, and I'm going to thin the black paint. I could also use fluid paint or inks or a Posca pen. It really, any of that is just fine. Just add some little curved out lashes. So lashes can be frustrating for some, I've noticed. And that's really just about line control. That's just why I think it's good to know that you can use so many different things to accomplish your lashes if you want to. When using detail brushes, you got to wipe them off periodically after you thin paint. Otherwise, they have this sort of like water drop that runs down the brush and will get in your stuff. Okay, so I'm going to bring this here. Bring that around. I do like to change the curvature of my lashes depending on their positioning in the eye. So if they're coming over to the right, they have a little bit of that right curve. And if they're coming over to the left, they have a little bit of that left curve. I like a bit of a ridiculousness in my lashes. But it's really up to your preference. No right, no wrong. It's okay to not even have lashes. See, we just really, really play with it. Now I can't really see my lashes unless I do white lining. Also in them, I'll do that a little bit later. Help me get kind of like my ridiculousness going. You just make yourself happy. I really like those last few lines. Okay, so I think it's very important to dry everything before the next stage. So we're going to dry everything. And when we come back, I'm going to show you what you can do next. So I don't want to do my white lining yet. And I realize that I've got my black lashes going over where I've got to put quite a lot of hair. So I'll have to be careful through here and probably put them back a little bit. But it's okay. I don't really mind. I am going to make a lot of curls. I'm going to start with a dark curl, and then I'm going to, excuse me, I grab my towel. I've got to then keep adding highlights of brighter and brighter red hair as I go. So we're going to begin with our darkest color, which you guys are kind of familiar with. I think I want to start with a hog brush for the curls. I'll start with this because I don't want to spend forever doing the hair. And I want it to be thick curls, but then if I find I don't have enough control, I'll switch to a smaller brush. So this is a number 18 Raphael Artini brush. It's a hog bristle brush. You could use either a round or a hog, a synthetic. Doesn't really matter. I just want to have a nice round that will let me make a lot of hair easily. I'm going to go ahead and get the brush a little bit wet, and I'm going to take my Docs Purple and my quinacridone magenta and some cad red, and I'm going to make a very, very dark color that we're going to be starting from. And there's going to be a ton of S curves. Those are strokes that curve and remind you of the letter S. Kind of self-explanatory, but you know, sometimes one doesn't know, so I like to make sure that I kind of explain. As I come down, I'm going to piece into more specific little curls. I think having a lot of hair is a ton of fun. Just a ton in general. And I think having curly hair is a ton of fun. Now, with hair, I don't really paint every single lock of hair, every single individual strand. I paint the general shape of it, and then I come in and add highlights and details that pull the hair, you know, into its, hopefully its final form. I will sometimes even change directions as I go and be like, oh, you know, and there's going to be a lot of my background covered up here, and that's okay. Because I'm not a machine. And this is not machine learning. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm actually very impressed. I'm going to tell you guys, very impressed with what these algorithms, these machine-based learning systems can do. Interested to see how artists decide how they want to work with these tools and how we think about it as a society in the future, yeah? Hard to know. Easy to be afraid of the future or overly bright-eyed about the future. And I think it's so important for all of us to just, you know, proceed. I think especially with such powerful technologies with thought and care. I mean, the internet was amazing, as we all, you know, now changed everybody's world. But there was definitely a time with the internet where there wasn't good legislation and a lot of like not ideal stuff could happen. Now here is where I know I've got to be a little extra careful because I did my lashes out here and it was into where the hair is. And so I'll come and put those back later. You see me going along the face, kind of curving that line, and that's just because the hair is going to be tight to the face. The shadow of it, she's framed by her hair. Just trying to make lots of little crazy brush strokes to make wild hair. Wild, full, long, flowing hair. Fun times. And again, this isn't the final like fall of hair, and the reason for that is that we're going to really reveal the hair in the highlights in a smaller brush. This is just getting down the first form of it. That's rather nice. Now, to really kind of layer up the next bit, I will have to have this be dry, and then I will come in with a smaller brush and do some details here. That'll be a lot of fun, I think, I feel. So let's dry this, and we come back, we're going to add those details. So I've got a synthetic round. This is a number 10 texture, and I'm going to make smaller little detail curls, and I'm going to do those with a little bit of my Quin Magenta and my Cad Red together. Try to get these, so it's not quite, you know, a pure Cad color, but it's certainly much brighter than the background. I'm going to begin here, and those little S strokes are going to become more detailed and have lots more little tendrils to them. And you can see having the dark hair underneath really helps this top hair sort of pop. And it looks so bright against against the dark hair. Where it's down here over the skin, it's a little bit light, so I'll come back with a little bit of my dark color just to make sure that the coverage is nice and solid. Come through here. Getting that little dark color. So you can see me kind of working the dark back in where it might be needed, just to help the hair fall better. Because it's easy enough to come back. I'm very much enjoying how she's coming in. I very much like her hair. I always enjoy the metaphor of hair and crown together. I think it's sort of interesting how we think of hair and relate to it. You know, one from, you know, if you come up with a religious background, it's biblical context, you know, your relationship to hair, if you felt good about it. So very few people feel amazing about their hair. If they have curly hair, they want straight hair. And if they have straight hair, they want curly hair or different color hair. My aunt had alopecia and, you know, really struggled with hair her whole life. And then if you think about societally, like how we have crown laws and everything to protect people's right to their hair, it's interesting how hair becomes a crown. And it's, you know, its own representation of a whole kingdom, I think is fascinating. So I always sort of enjoy that process of painting it and really kind of going crazy with it for that very reason, because it's just a noticeable thing, isn't it? Now I can come in with a more Cad Red on the toe of the brush, and then let's actually call this a step, and I'll show you this next highlighting thing because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed by it. So let's call this a step. We don't have to draw anything, but we're going to come back and I'm going to continue to highlight up. As I move out of the magenta Cad Red space, I'll start to come along and find little flows or falls of the hair that I've sort of painted in. And this is where the hair goes from being kind of a crazy hot mess to sort of a lot of fun for me. And I always like to see how catching the highlights of the light of the hair really pulls it all together. Curving the strokes. You see, I just don't paint it the whole length of the shaft. I just try to find places where maybe the light has caught a curl or flow of hair. And so therefore we're seeing its highlights. And that 3 layers of red is what makes this the reddest hair ever. I think Alice in Wonderland is a metaphor for so many things in the human experience too. Those passages of life that feel so foreign and alien to us, the things we're not ready for, transitions from childhood to adulthood, transitions from stages of life, you know, finding yourself in an unfamiliar area, faced with unfamiliar technology. I think that certain tales like almost speak to our human subconscious. I'm continuing to just curl these around. And I love fairy tales for that because they do help us sort of find that. You'll notice that I'm sort of highlighting through here. So there's depth in there, but then the highlights pull it up. Catching little bits. Well, she's got a mane. I'll roll off the brush, pulling paint out of it. Sometimes I'll roll it on the paper towel just to control the load on the tip. All right, now we're going to want to dry everything, and then we've got some detail work to be doing even at this stage. So let's hit everything with the hairdryer and come back. I'm going to show you finishing the eyelashes and the eyebrows. So in this step, we get to add some details. I'm going to get my glasses back on because that does help me, you know, really see what I'm doing. We're going to finish out the shape of the eyes, some highlights there, maybe some detailing in the hair, and the lash work. I'm going to take my #1 liner, and I'll come back into first my dark blue color that I had, and make sure that I've got a nice kind of little creasing on my eyes so that they feel like they are at least sisters. Sometimes I have to check that work on occasion, and that's okay, I don't mind. And then I'm going to grab a little of my kind of yellow ochre with a bit of white on it. Just make sure that this closed eye has a full lid to it. Tap that out. It's always at this stage I like to kind of just touch up little things. I'm going to go ahead and grab my Cad Red here. Her little heart symbol. And we're going to begin by kind of putting our lashes back over the hair where we lost them. But at some point I'm going to have to come in and kind of add some white lining to that. And I may have to dry it and then come back and do it, or I maybe can do some other little weird detail work and then come back to this. So if I take my red and I load it on my liner, can also make sure that I've got little tendrils of hair that are a little more delicate, and maybe kind of frame the face more gently. Just something that you can add up and do. Decide if I want to kind of brighten up the lips a little bit with a little magenta and red. Still keeping the same shadows and everything. It's just kind of like a little pop of color that can be nice. If that goes well, I can rinse out and again make sure that I've completely gotten all the drops of water off of this. And one thing I can do when I have lashes that are difficult to you know, see out, I can come here and take what this is this is titanium white fluid acrylic, and it is a highly pigmented and thinned high flow paint. And I can just put a little bit on the brush and make some highlights on these little lashes. You can see it just adds just a little delicate detail and helps us really see them coming out over the hair. A little reflection to the lip if I want to. Just also a little bit of the reflections of these lashes as well. It's looking fairly nice. I like that. Okay. We'll come back and I'll show you what's next. So here I've just got a couple more little tweaks I'm going to want to make. I will continue to work with my detail brush because I want to make these changes in small increments. I want to kind of improve my eye line here where it's more symmetrical. And so I'm going to take a little bit of my blue color and I'm going to lower this just a touch. So sometimes when you're working, you've got to kind of watch for those things, like how, you know, how it is lining up. And that can be challenging to do. You can find places to adjust by looking at things on your phone is a way to go. That will do it. I tend to lower rather than raise because that's easier to do, especially when you have extreme lashes. So that's what I'm doing, is just making sure that I'm happy with my placements. All right, because when we're working so close to work, that can be really hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and add a little highlight to the brows as well of the red. Just so that her eyebrows have kind of a matchy-matchy thing going on with the rest of the hair. I'm going to also line along the nose. Just a little white line, just to make sure that that delineation in space is very clear. Adding a little bit more to the heart. I think it's important that we take time always when we're doing work. Just kind of think about our symmetry and things and make sure that we're happy with that as, you know, as we see it. Again, watch that hidden drop. That's just the killer and stuff like this. I thought a lot about adding more symbolism here and there, but I feel like there's something kind of clean and iconic here. I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to the underside of the nose, a little definition. Maybe a little bit under here as well. Just exaggerating those little places. Where we understand who she is without being super heavy-handed about who she is. I like it very much. Now, at this stage, if you're happy with everything, you have to figure out where and how you want to sign. I think that my inclination would be to sign here in some kind of a way. So what I would do is I would turn the work and I would pick, you know, a color that I could use that's sort of already here. So my signature is visible, but not a distraction. Framers don't love me for how I sign. But again, you know, it's my painting and I've got to have it how I want it to be. So I can't wait to see your version. Let me come back and get big and I will talk to you about some final thoughts about this piece. So here we are doing human work, doing human things in the face of what some people might consider to be what they call the singularity. It's a point in time where things will be so different it's difficult to predict the future. Now, those of us who've lived a minute remember Y2K. So that's the other reason why I'm kind of taking a wait and see kind of approach, because I remember a lot of people were certainly concerned that the entire banking industry was going to just collapse over a calendar date. And I mean, for technological reasons, sure, but it's interesting how sometimes it's very easy to fall into concern or fear when we don't need to, or not be cautious enough when we do. And I feel that AI is the kind of technology that is like that. The changes are so quick to the point where I couldn't teach you possibly a tutorial on it, because in 2 weeks it could be entirely different. Right now there's about to be a couple new big breakthroughs, and the tech companies are trying to decide if they want to put a pause on things or not, to consider the impacts on human beings. And there's just a lot to think about in licensing, intellectual property, creativity, what's original, who we are as human beings. And it made me really think about how I and the teachers here and most people that paint in some way in a streaming situation or live on YouTube or in that kind of a way. Well, how we created our work is pretty evident. There's this digital record of it, but then maybe eventually they'll be able to make a video of somebody doing that, and it isn't. There's no way to tell. It's not something I have a lot of control over. I do have control over what I allow to take space in my studio and in my head in some sense. And I say this as somebody who struggles sometimes with mental health issues, is that I have to choose how I feel about something. And I've chosen in this area to really try to take a deep breath, be open to the artists that are saying they're frustrated with the technology, and be as open to the artists that are saying that it's really helped them in their process. Try to be really open to the artists that are using it in a way that none of its creators intended, and just listen instead of fill up all the space, which if you watch me at all, you know my whole thing is talky, and I fill up all the space. But I just feel right now it's this time to sort of like proceed. Again, I keep saying this, optimistically and cautiously. I find that the Queen of Hearts is somebody who is strong, and you know, it's interesting. The construct of Wonderland is seen as a villain because she's just so quick to set a boundary, perhaps a violent boundary, but a clear one. And it's interesting how, as women, stepping into those strong and definitive and decisive roles can somehow cast us in a negative light. I think we've been really revisiting that in the last 10 years about how we look at strong women and whether we perceive them to be villainous or not. And so I think also she's a very good character or symbol or idea to sort of hold in our heads and our hearts. You know, she held her kingdom in a mad world, and we're having to hold our kingdoms in a mad world. So these are my thoughts. I will be checking comments. I'll be checking group. I'm happy. I always stay up to date on AI technology. So if you have questions whenever they come in, chances are I will be within a weeks of whatever is happening, and I'm happy to answer questions or let you know what the latest dish or tea is on the subject, or if you just have questions about the painting. And I can't wait to see yours. Be sure to see it in group. And I always say this every year, and I'm going to say it again. This is my biggest advice for you. Do as much as you can without stressing yourself out. The different teachers and the different viewpoints and the different voices, techniques, skills, mediums, they will come together and make you a better artist, a more resilient artist in every single way. And it's so worth doing as much of it as you can. I want you guys to be good to yourselves and good to each other. And I'll see you at an easel really soon. Bye bye.